So, welcome back to COMP335, Communicating Computer Science. Today we leave the more theoretical topics behind and go into lesson planning, which is very closely related to what teachers do and also what you will be practicing for our Taste-A-Day sessions. Again, I hope not too much dry theory this time and much more practice, but a few things that I want to say up front. First of all, why do we do this and what is it? What is lesson planning? Some motivation. There was a survey of teachers, both primary and secondary school teachers, and they both said, for one, they spend most of their time actually preparing lessons, not delivering them, which is quite a statement. And they also say, yes, and it takes too much time. That's at least their feeling. A second piece of information. You will know about Ofsted, the Office for Standards in Education is inspecting schools every couple of years, and then they get a rating. And if a school gets an outstanding, then this attracts the parents who look at this. So they send their kids there. And if a school goes down in the rating, that's a big headache for the head teacher. So these are kind of important for the schools, but Ofsted does not explicitly ask for lesson plans. And it doesn't grade the schools depending on what the lesson plan really is. Yet the teachers seem to do it, right? So why? Well, there seems to be an inherent value that teachers get out of this planning. They don't just like wasting their time, I suppose. They feel it helps them to make the delivery smooth if they prepare it properly. So it's not that they're externally forced to do it, but they seem to get value out of it, and they seem to spend quite some time on it. Lessons are planned using a fairly standard format. This is a bit of a contradiction, I guess, but what I mean is the layout of what you exactly write down varies, also because it's not enforced. It's not like you have to hand in your lesson plans to Ofsted, and then maybe there would be some format enforced. But the content that goes into this is fairly standard. We'll talk about this. So planning is important because it seems to help teachers. It seems to help them get through their lessons in the way they intended to. And I suppose if you've been teaching in any context, you know that it's very hard to predict how things go, especially if you want to involve the audience. A lecture talk like this is fairly plannable. If you practice it a few times, you know how long it'll take. But anything beyond that, including activities, it often doesn't go the way you originally thought it would go. So you plan ahead, you learn if you deliver it one time, what you have to do better next time, and you try to keep a written record of that. That's all there is. Now my conclusion from this is, if planning takes so much time but is also so valuable, let's try to not do it from scratch for every single thing and every teacher again. Let's try to share these and reuse them. And of course, this is not something I invented. There's the Computing at School initiative, which does exactly that. It's a big kind of forum where teachers share what they prepared, and people can take it from there and comment on it. And a bit more structured is this Teach Computing curriculum, where it's not driven by individual teachers and crowdsourced, but instead a National Institute and the Raspberry Pi Foundation together set up this task force to create a curriculum. So the lesson plan itself is, the idea behind this is this sharing. You're designing a good lesson and you will invest quite some time on it, probably much more than a standard teacher can spend on their standard everyday lesson. You will probably spend around 3 weeks, not working full-time, but around 3 weeks of planning your lesson, which goes 1 hour. If you take that ratio, it's quite insane, right? But you will also be doing a lesson that's a bit more in the limelight than a standard school lesson. You want to produce something that's engaging and particularly attractive to kids. But the idea is we don't want to waste that effort that you put in. So we want to make it useful and preserve it. So make it so that someone else could take your lesson and deliver it. And everything they need for that, you should write down. That's the idea. It should come with some some slides like these for the presentation part, and the material for the activities. But the part that's often missed if you don't think about it up front is all the unwritten knowledge, how to actually set up the delivery, how long should things take, what order, maybe at what points was it particularly useful to ask a specific question to promote some learning experience. All these things should go into your lesson plan. There's a few other things that are useful if you think about using this in the context of a longer journey through a subject like computing. You want, well, to link it to the national curriculum because schools have to show that they cover this. And in your case, it's useful to do that because you want to tie it into something that the kids already know or have seen before, but you don't want to duplicate what the teachers showed them. So by doing that, you can make sure both is true. You should also be explicit about what you expect students at this point to already know, because otherwise the prerequisites don't match up and there will be frustration in the room. If you write it down and it's not true on the day, that's a different story. We will try to not make that happen, but at least then your lesson can still be valuable if it's used in a group where this knowledge or skills are already there. Listing learning outcomes is a useful way to just frame your thinking. If you put together different activities, sometimes it's easy to get lost in the details of one activity. You do something because it's kind of fun to do. Maybe you lose the sight for the bigger picture. And learning outcomes means you start with what do you want to teach, and then you deliver an activity that's effective for that. That's more important for a school lesson where you have to get the kids to a certain point. For outreach, maybe it's a little less important because we're primarily interested in just provoking interest, and we don't necessarily have a fixed agenda, what we have to teach. But it's still useful what you think kids can take out of your lesson, because then a teacher later could take your lesson and say, I want them to learn this or that, and this seems to match. And then the more practical things, how much time do you allocate for each part? How is it set up? Like, do you want kids to work in groups, etc.? Do you need specific material? List everything. Okay. I made a template based on what we've had in previous years. Well, you find it on the website that was linked on the slides, and I'll share it with you on Teams in a second. So this basically is just a scaffold of all the things that were on the slide put into headlines or given some structure in the tables. One thing specifically you should think about before you start designing, or maybe along the way when you design. There's different ways how you can structure your lesson. A fairly standard one might be you give some introduction to a topic, then you do some activity with the kids where they do something, and at the end you wrap it up a bit, tell them a bit, this is what you could have taken from it, or maybe discuss outcomes from the activity. But you can also have other models where you have activities that are shorter, but then interrupted by some little presentation parts again from you. It's sometimes helpful because it gives more structure, so you avoid that some groups run too far ahead or others are completely disengaging. It can be useful to have little checkpoints. You could also have this where you just verbally take from one lesson to the other without going fully back to the plenum. Everyone takes their seat, you put up slides, etc. That's up to you. I mean, the purpose of this picture is it's a good thing for you to include this picture in your lesson plan or have it as a table, just to give this high-level picture up front, make it explicit. Okay, so far for the general lesson plan, what should go into this. Next, let's look a bit at the concrete assessment that we'll do for this module. And just to remind you about the timeline, the final submission of this is in December. I know, long time ahead. And we'll want to select the topics finally late mid-November. But of course, you're very much encouraged to start thinking about this right now. Not right now, just listen for now, in 5 minutes. We'll have some individual meetings in the meantime to discuss what you have come up with, and I'll try to bring my experience into it to help you deliver something cool. And maybe we can also arrange that some of you discuss with each other what you liked or what you would like to improve. And then on this second session where we meet again here for 2 hours on campus, I'd like you to give a very short pitch of your lesson. Note that this is after the submission. So in a sense, you write everything up, including everything you need for this lesson. I'll come back to this, but you can see down there what I mean. When I say lesson plan, I really mean everything that's needed for the lesson. So the idea is that you submit this for this 13th of December to give me some days to have a look at it. And then we meet here and discuss it. The idea there is, for one, I'd like to give you an opportunity to celebrate a bit what you've done and show it to the others, show your pride, and also for the group to give some feedback. Because this is the final version for the assessment, but it's not the written in stone version for the delivery, so you can still make some changes and polish it a bit into a certain direction. I hope this will be a bit of a fun session where you can just celebrate what you have achieved. But that means you'll have to work substantially before this deadline to make that happen. Yeah, remember this is the biggest chunk of the mark. So this lesson plan, it's on purpose to put so much emphasis on the planning and not the delivery itself. One part, because who knows what happens with the delivery if new restrictions come in force. But also the plan is really something you have control over and teachers feel is important. So this is something that yeah, you should just keep in mind. My recommendation is try to block certain days in this time period. You roughly know when it'll be happening. You have roughly a month between when you definitely should know your topic and when you have to submit it. That's ample time, but yeah, try to block some time in that so that you have the chance to work on this. You should think about some slides for the presentation parts, and you should think about the activities. Anything you need for that should be prepared. And well, you should write a lesson plan like using the template I've shown that puts everything together so that someone could, in theory, take what you submit there and just deliver it without asking you further questions. That's the ideal submission in a sense. I put up some marking scheme. I tried to break it down into different categories. I hope this will be feasible and as promising as it sounds in theory to mark your submissions on this. I basically put most of the weight on the actual content and what you came up with, and just very little on the more tangential parts, how it fits into the national curriculum. I think the activities for me are the key part, because that's often where you make the difference between something that's okay-ish, it teaches something, and really memorable and enthusing or creating interest. So spend most of the time thinking about great activities. I think the topic is kind of secondary, especially in your case. You can pick any topic. You don't have a specific curriculum that you have to cover. It's unlike teachers in school who are forced to do a certain thing. You can pick any topic that you feel is suitable. So you can start with an activity that's really fun to do. And then as a second thought, you can think about what can you teach about computer science as a secondary goal. And then the rest hopefully follows along this. Questions on this so far? Yeah, I should have mentioned somewhere on the slides. The whole thing is for 1 hour or a little short of an hour because we have hour slots and you need probably 5 minutes from one session to the other. Also, my experience is if you plan something, it always takes longer than you plan, especially with kids. So maybe plan for 50 minutes or 45 even. And if it then is conveniently delivered in 55 minutes, you're good. What's much worse is if you plan something that should really take 10 more minutes and you don't have them and you have to stop in the middle of something. And again, on the other hand, no one forces you to push a lot of content through. Rather go easy on the number of things you do, but try to make them somehow memorable and, yeah, thought-provoking maybe for a follow-up thinking by those who are susceptible to this. Okay. Other questions on the submission so far? I think I have one more slide on things that might help you. Because you've probably never done this, and it might be useful to have some examples. I have some material from previous iterations of this module, but unfortunately, for one, I won't be sharing those widely. Maybe we can internally look over some. The other thing is, I don't have the full package of things like I want you to submit. So it's not exactly comparable. But what we have now is this Teach Computing curriculum, which basically tries to do the same thing except for the standard coverage of the national curriculum. But they worked out sessions on all these topics and delivered exactly these packets. They have a lesson plan, which is a little different in the format, but not too far from what I'm asking you to do. They have slides, they have the activities described with all the material. So this is exactly what we're doing. And here's one specific example. I can show you in a second what it looks like. But I guess the more useful way for you to use this is if you have a topic, you go through that website and check if there's a topic that's related to yours or similar to yours, and then you can see what they've done. I think it's a great way to see if you're planning way too much or way too advanced material, or the opposite. And also check a little bit on the amount of detail that they thought was necessary to describe this. Then you can kind of get a feeling for how much is useful. And you can check using that. Well, we don't know if schools exactly follow this, and it's very new, so they probably don't all follow it. But they will do something similar. You can use this to check what the kids might know or what they might have seen in school. Yeah, I listed a few things that are different or that you should not take as a literal guidance. The format for the lesson plans is slightly different, but you'll figure this out. They have the entire curriculum broken down by key stages, and then the key stage is broken down by years. And then each year is broken into units. And that's one unit is, for example, here, Python programming with sequences of data. So they learn about lists in Python, okay? And this is 6 lessons from this one unit. So they take 6 hours to learn about lists in Python and how to work with them. And one of them is this one lesson, which takes 1 hour, and you can look at the details there, okay? It also gives you an indication, 1 hour in school, it doesn't cover a lot of things. And maybe also this is the hint for you, don't overdo it. You can only cover so much in this one lesson of outreach sessions. There's a few things that they do there because it's embedded in the whole curriculum that I think we just don't necessarily need. All right. That's all I wanted to say in general or in theory about this. What I'd like you to do next is put this into practice. Now, because 6 is also an even number, so we can still do this in pairs. Um, I asked you to have a look at this summer school thing, this online lesson, online course that we developed last year, because then you roughly know what this is about and you can practice writing a lesson plan about this. We have half an hour left, which should probably not be enough to write a full lesson plan. So you should pick out the topic that you think either is most important or is hardest for you to do. And so you can practice that first, and then I can have a look at or give you feedback what I think is good or bad. It's my attempt to give you a chance to practice this on a topic where it doesn't hurt, where also the session is already kind of worked out, so you don't have to think about what to do and how do the slides look like, etc., blah, blah. You just do the lesson plan document at the end on top of that.